Boker Tov, everybody, and Shabbat Shalom. My parents had an expression that I think they learned from their parents. Originally in our family, it was shared in Yiddish, I imagine, but the sentiment is a very universal sentiment. And it went something like this. You wish that life would be easier, but it's not. And the sentiment acknowledges that when we're facing challenges, which happen often, we do have that wish that somehow things would be easier, not as complicated, maybe that we would have less pushback, or who knows. And yet we know that often things are complicated, often things are difficult. I want to speak this morning for reasons which I think will be clear about struggle, which is something that all of us experience in one way or another. Emotional struggle, physical struggle. Where does that struggle come from? How are we expected to contend with the struggles that are really a part of each and every one of our lives? And of course, I'm referring today to the quintessential struggle that our ancestor Jacob had. This was a struggle which took place, as I mentioned, after he had been away from his brother, when he was preparing to meet up with his brother. And he took his family and divided them, and he sent ahead gifts to try to propitiate his brother, and then he stayed behind. So Jacob struggles with an ish, with an individual, Ve'yavek ish imo. He has this struggle with an individual. There are commentators who suggest that this individual somehow was the angel of Esau who was coming to him in advance of that moment of meeting. And there are other commentators who suggest that perhaps it was an angel who was trying to strengthen Jacob for this moment, whatever strength he would happen to need in order to face his brother Esau. But regardless, what seems to be the case is that Jacob experiences a kind of transformation that occurs during this struggle. He experiences a transformation because at the end of it, he is told by this being, you're going to have a new name. And in the biblical context, a new name is symbolic of a major internal transformation. And the new name is Yisrael. Why? Kisarita im Elohim ve'im anashim vatuchal. Because you struggled with divine beings and you struggled with human beings, vatuchal, and somehow you prevailed. I want us to think about struggle as transformation. Sometimes we are struggling because there are things that we have done that have impacted other people negatively, and we're coming to terms with that. Sometimes we're struggling because there are things that others have done to us, and we're coming to terms with it. Sometimes we're struggling because there are circumstances beyond our control that we have to contend with, or we're trying to find the right way to move from one place to another place. I want to share two examples of struggle, one that comes from the fictional world and one that comes from real life. And hopefully that will give us a little bit of a background and a foundation to explore our own struggles. So the first comes from a novel by Aleph Bet Yehoshua that I read this summer. And the novel in English is called Open Heart. It's written from the perspective of a young physician by the name of Benji Rubin. And this physician is sent to India to try to help save the life of the daughter of the chief hospital administrator. So Dr. Benji Rubin goes to India and he has all sorts of adventures with the parents of this young woman and with this woman. And because it is told from his perspective, he writes about the complexity of his own life. He writes about his struggles. He writes about his passions, which get him into trouble. I won't give away all of the details of the novel if you want to read it. Interestingly, in Hebrew, the title of the book is Shiva Mehodu, which means return from India. And knowing Aleph Bet Yehoshua, I wouldn't be surprised if he's also playing on the name Shiva, which is the name of one of the Hindu deities. In English, the title Open Heart refers to a surgery that takes place within the novel, but it may also refer to the opening up of emotions that are complicated and often conflicted. This novel, like many novels that are written in the first person, this underscores and explores the conflicting passions and emotions that people have, the internal struggles that people have. The second example that I want to give, American author Isabel Wilkerson wrote a book about the migration of Black people in America from the South to the North. It's an excellent book. She doesn't give an exhaustive history, but rather she traces the stories of three individuals who go from the South to the North, and they each have their own struggles. One becomes a surgeon in LA, one becomes a healthcare worker in Chicago, and one becomes a porter on a train line that goes back and forth from New York to Florida, where he comes from. So I'm going to say a word about the last individual, the train porter. His name is George Swanson Sterling. So he starts out in Florida. He has to leave Florida because he is picking cotton as part of that whole sharecropper system, which was very unjust, as many recognized. And he got together with a few workers and he tried to negotiate for higher wages, as a result of which he got himself in trouble. And he realized for that reason and for other reasons that he had to leave and he had to go up north. There are numerous struggles in his life, a complicated marriage, challenges with his son, and also he struggles to try to do his part to bring about justice when there is injustice. And I just want to share with you one little snippet, which I think is very evocative. So as I mentioned, he is a porter on a train. And before desegregation in the South, it was necessary, as the train was crossing into the South, for Black people who were sitting in the same cars with white people to transfer themselves to cars that were only to serve Black people. Those were the cars where they had to sit. And so he would have to facilitate that and help people with their belongings and get them into the Black only cars. After desegregation came to the South, there were still a number of Southern white train workers who wanted to intimidate people into thinking that they still had to change cars when they crossed the border into the South. And he determined that he was going to quietly go to all of the Black passengers and to say to them discreetly, you don't have to move now. You can stay put where you are. And some of them were just so intimidated and so nervous that they moved anyway. But others, because of the conversation with him, stayed put because now the law was on their side. So this is just one of many moments of struggle in his life and one of many moments of struggle that were depicted in this remarkable book, which I highly recommend that you read, by Isabel Wilkerson. The name of the book is The Warmth of Other Suns. So where does that leave us? On this Shabbat, when we read about Jacob's struggle, I want us to consider our own struggles. There are struggles with our own challenges, struggles with people within the orbit of our lives, struggles based on our own shortcomings. Sometimes we struggle with the injustices that we cause others, and sometimes we struggle with the injustices that others impose on us and others. We who identify as Bnei Israel, the children of Jacob, the children of Israel, the one who struggles, we have a long history of struggle as part of our larger story. And of course, our own personal stories intersect with our larger story. I want to leave us with a hope and a prayer. I hope and I pray that others from time to time will look at us in our struggles and will say to us what the individual said to Jacob, Vatuchal, you have prevailed. And if no one else says it to us, then I wish us and hope for us and bless us with the capacity that we will be able to say that to ourselves. Shabbat Shalom.